When I saw my name on my grandson's school forms, I froze. It wasn't the familiar handwriting I had expected. No, it was the cold, clinical words that made my stomach churn. Household paid help. I couldn't believe my eyes. My own name. My identity. Reduced to that. Household paid help. I had raised my son, cared for my grandchildren, and all of it had been erased in one sweeping moment. I thought back to the years I'd spent in this family, the sacrifices, the long hours I put into making sure they had everything they needed. Yet, here I was, being labeled as nothing more than a hired hand. It didn't make sense. Paige, my daughter-in-law, had been so kind to me, or so I thought. But this was a betrayal I wasn't prepared for. My hands trembled as I set the papers down on the kitchen table. The silence of the house seemed louder now, more oppressive. I stood there for a moment, gathering my thoughts, trying to make sense of it all. How had I missed the signs? Was this some kind of cruel joke? No, this wasn't a joke. This was something far worse. Paige had always been a little distant, but I never imagined she would do something like this. I remembered all the times she'd asked me to watch the kids, to take on extra chores around the house. I never thought to question her motives, always assuming it was just part of family life. But this was different. I was no longer part of the family. I was a mere employee, a hired help. I felt the weight of the years I had spent in this house crash down on me. The memories of birthdays, holidays, and simple moments of joy seemed so distant now, like they had belonged to someone else. What had I done wrong? Why wasn't I good enough to be treated with respect? The pain of betrayal cut deep, but there was something else, too. Something that burned inside me, something that had been smoldering for a long time. A quiet anger. A realization that I had been allowing this to happen, that I had been complicit in my own mistreatment. But not anymore. Not after today. I was done pretending everything was fine. I was done being the invisible woman in my own family. As I picked up the phone, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let Paige and my son, Andrew, erase me from their lives like I was some kind of stranger. No, I would fight for my dignity. And when they returned from their weekend getaway, they'd see me in a new light. I would no longer be their servant. I would be their equal. The silence of the house seemed to stretch on forever as I sat there, the papers still lying on the kitchen table, mocking me with their coldness. I thought back to the years I had spent in this family, raising my son, caring for my grandchildren, offering support when needed. All of it seemed so meaningless now. Paige, my daughter-in-law, had always been the perfect picture of politeness, at least to my face. But beneath that surface, something had changed. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The way she'd always made me feel like I was imposing whenever I asked for a little help. The little things, the way she'd always asked me to watch the kids at the last minute. The way she subtly made it clear that my presence wasn't exactly welcome unless it was convenient for her. I had brushed it all aside, thinking it was just a phase. But this was different. This wasn't just a little inconvenience or a poorly timed request. This was betrayal. Paige had gone behind my back, changing the forms of my grandson, and in doing so, she had taken away my identity, reducing me to nothing more than an employee. As I thought about it more, I realized that the signs had always been there. I had just chosen to ignore them. I had allowed myself to be taken advantage of, convincing myself that it was just part of family life. I wasn't just a grandmother. I was someone who had spent years caring for everyone else, with little regard for my own well-being. Now, the truth was impossible to ignore. The realization hit me hard, but it also sparked something within me, an inner fire that I hadn't felt in years. I had been so focused on being the helpful, selfless mother and grandmother that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had neglected my own needs, my own boundaries. And that was something I could no longer do. I wasn't going to let Paige and my son, Andrew, continue treating me this way. Not anymore. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The anger that had been simmering inside me finally bubbled to the surface, and with it came a quiet, determined resolve. I was going to stand up for myself. I wasn't going to let my son or my daughter-in-law control my life any longer. As I sat there in the stillness of the kitchen, I knew that things had to change. I had to make them see me for who I truly was. Not just someone to be taken for granted. Not just someone to be overlooked. I was still here, and I deserved to be treated with respect. When they came back from their weekend trip, they would see a different side of me. I would no longer be invisible in my own family. The next morning, I woke up early, the sun barely peeking through the curtains. I felt strangely calm, as if something inside me had shifted overnight. I had spent so many years taking care of everyone else, always putting their needs before my own, and now, for the first time in a long while, I was thinking about what I wanted, what I needed. I wasn't going to be the invisible woman in this family anymore. I wasn't going to just accept the disrespect any longer. As I made my morning coffee, I thought about how I had been feeling for months, maybe even years. The subtle signs of neglect. The way Paige never really appreciated my help with the kids. The way Andrew seemed distant, like I was just a bystander in my own family. I had spent so many days convincing myself it was just a phase, or maybe that it was my fault for expecting too much. But this was different. The betrayal stung more than anything else had. Paige's calculated move to change the forms, to relegate me to something less than family. It was the final straw. I had to act. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my dignity. It was about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. I knew that I had to find a way to confront Paige and Andrew, but I didn't want to approach it recklessly. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to be calm. I was going to be strong. When they returned, I would make sure they understood that I was no longer the person they could manipulate. I started thinking about what I could do. What was the best way to show them that I wouldn't just let this slide? The house felt empty without them. I found myself walking through the rooms, remembering the times I had spent here with my late husband, the times when everything felt right. I missed him terribly, but I also knew that I had to stop living in the past. I couldn't keep living in his shadow, in this house full of memories that no longer served me. It was time to take control. I didn't know what the future held, but I was certain of one thing. I wasn't going to let Paige and Andrew walk all over me anymore. When they returned, I would look them in the eye and make them understand that I was still here. I still mattered. And no matter what happened, I wasn't going to let them erase me. As the days passed, I found myself preparing for their return, knowing I had to confront Paige and Andrew. The thought of facing them made my stomach churn, but I couldn't back down now. I had already allowed too much to happen. They had taken my silence for weakness, and now I had to show them I wasn't someone to be dismissed. I spent my time in the house reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. The years of sacrifices, the endless hours spent caring for them, and the constant feeling of being overlooked. I had been so busy making sure they were happy, so focused on their lives, that I had forgotten to live my own. But that was all over now. I was reclaiming my life. I knew that confronting them would be difficult, but it had to be done. I couldn't continue living in a house where I wasn't respected, where my presence was only valued when it was convenient. When they finally came back, I was ready. I didn't show any signs of nervousness. I walked into the living room, where Paige and Andrew had just returned, and greeted them with a calm smile. The tension in the room was palpable, but I refused to let it show. Paige glanced at me, but didn't speak. Andrew's eyes avoided mine, just as they always did when something was wrong. I had expected this, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to shrink back. I wasn't going to be the one who always kept quiet. I took a deep breath and broke the silence. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. Andrew looked at me, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, guilt, maybe, or concern. Paige, however, didn't seem moved. She crossed her arms and gave me a cold smile. "What's this about, Evelyn?" she asked, her tone clipped. I felt a surge of anger but controlled it. "It's about the forms you changed," I said. "I saw them. I saw what you did." Paige's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "You're overreacting," she said, brushing off my words. "It's just paperwork. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything." I replied, my voice firm. "You took something from me. You took my dignity. You reduced me to nothing more than someone you pay to help. I won't stand for it anymore." Paige opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing her. "No, Paige. You've taken advantage of me for too long. I've let you, but not anymore." The words came out more confidently than I expected. There was a weight to them now, a finality that made me realize I wasn't just speaking to Paige and Andrew. I was speaking to myself, too. I had taken my power back. Paige looked at Andrew, then back at me, her face hardening. "You've got a lot of nerve," she said, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I could feel the shift in the air, the tension between us growing thicker. Andrew finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you'd be okay with it. It's just business stuff." I shook my head. "It's not business. It's family. And if you can't see that, then maybe it's time for me to start thinking about what's best for me, not for you." The silence that followed was heavy, and I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The beginning of something I wasn't going to let go unnoticed anymore. The days that followed were heavy with silence. I could feel the tension every time I walked through the house, the air thick with the unspoken words between us. Paige and Andrew had barely acknowledged me since our conversation, but there was a shift, a subtle unease that I knew was growing inside them. They were used to controlling everything, to having things go their way, but I wasn't part of their plan anymore. I wasn't going to let them continue using me. I spent the next few days organizing my thoughts, making decisions that I had been too afraid to make before. I started by looking through the papers, the ones that had always been kept in a drawer, hidden away. I had been so busy living my life for others that I had never taken the time to focus on my own future. But now, everything was different. I wasn't going to wait for someone else to make decisions for me anymore. It was time to take control. I began to gather everything I might need, things that had been neglected, things I had put aside for years. I contacted a lawyer to make sure that I wasn't being taken advantage of, that my rights were protected. I wanted to be ready for the next step, for whatever was to come. I knew that confronting Paige and Andrew again would be inevitable. They wouldn't let this go easily, but I was ready to face whatever was next. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had been keeping silent. For too long, I had allowed my son and his wife to walk over me. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had stood up for myself, and now, I had to keep that strength. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to tear the family apart. But I had to protect myself. If they wanted to see me as a servant, I would make sure they understood that I wasn't going to play that role anymore. The thought of it made me nervous, but it also gave me a sense of power, a feeling of being in control of my own life. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Paige would return, and so would Andrew, but when they did, they would see a different woman standing before them. No longer the quiet, compliant mother and grandmother. No, I would show them that I had a voice, and I would no longer allow them to erase my presence. When they walked through that door, they would see the consequences of their actions, and they would have to face the reality that things were changing. They had underestimated me, but that would be their mistake. The door creaked open, and the familiar sound of Paige and Andrew's footsteps echoed through the house. I could feel my heart race, but this time, it was different. I wasn't afraid. I was prepared. They had no idea what was coming. I had spent days gathering my strength, organizing everything, making sure I had the facts I needed. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me again. As they stepped into the living room, they both seemed surprised to find me standing there, calm and collected. Paige looked around the room, her eyes scanning for something familiar, something that would reassure her. But she found none of it. I was no longer the woman who would let her walk all over me. "Evelyn," Andrew said, his voice faltering slightly. "What's going on? We've been gone for a few days. Why are you acting like this?" His tone, usually so warm, was now laced with uncertainty. I looked at him, my gaze steady. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice controlled but firm. "And I've realized that I've been letting you both take advantage of me for far too long. It's time for that to stop." Paige's face twisted into a mask of disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice rising. "We're just trying to help you. Why are you making a scene? You don't get it, do you?" I said, taking a step closer to her. "You've been making all the decisions. You've been controlling everything. You think that just because I'm older, I'm supposed to sit quietly and let you push me around. But I'm done with that." Andrew's eyes widened, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking from me to Paige, unsure of how to respond. Paige was silent for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was trying to figure out how to regain control, but it was too late. I had already taken my power back. "You can't just change the forms, Paige," I continued. "You can't just treat me like I don't matter, like I'm not part of this family anymore. I'm your mother-in-law. I'm your family, and I'm not going to let you erase me." Paige opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "No more lies. No more manipulation. I've been silent for too long, but not anymore. If you want to have a relationship with me, you'll start treating me like an equal. Otherwise, I'll walk away." The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. Paige didn't know what to say. She had underestimated me, and now I was standing my ground. I wasn't going to let her push me out of the family. I wasn't going to let her think she could take everything from me. Andrew finally spoke, his voice quiet. Mom, I didn't know you felt this way. He looked at Paige, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't realize how much this was hurting you. Paige crossed her arms, her face hardening. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice cold. You don't know what you're talking about. But I didn't flinch. I had made my point, and I wasn't going to back down. I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, my voice steady. And if you think this is over, you're wrong. I'm not going to let you treat me like this anymore. The tension in the room was palpable, but I stood tall. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. And I wasn't going to stop now. The days after our confrontation were filled with a strange sense of quiet. Paige and Andrew had retreated into their usual silence, but this time, it felt different. The atmosphere in the house had shifted, and I wasn't sure if they were avoiding me or simply unsure of how to proceed. I spent my days taking care of myself, focusing on my own needs for the first time in years. It felt liberating to stop worrying about their demands, to stop sacrificing myself for their comfort. For the first time, I allowed myself the space to breathe. I started paying more attention to the things I had neglected over the years. I took long walks in the garden, something I hadn't done in ages. I spent hours going through old photo albums, remembering the years I had spent raising my son and caring for my family. It felt like I was reconnecting with a version of myself that I had lost somewhere along the way. One afternoon, as I sat in the kitchen sipping my tea, the phone rang. I hesitated before picking it up, knowing it was probably one of them, Paige or Andrew, trying to fix things, or at least pretend to. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Evelyn, it's Andrew, came his voice on the other end, soft and hesitant. Can we talk? I paused for a moment, considering his words. There was something different about his tone, an openness, a vulnerability that I hadn't heard before. Of course, I replied, my voice calm. What's on your mind? There was a long pause before Andrew spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I've been thinking about everything, about what you said, he began. I realize now that I've been blind to a lot of things. I took you for granted. I let Paige influence me in ways that I shouldn't have. And I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. I had waited for this moment, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Andrew, I said after a pause, I appreciate your apology, but it's not just about the words. It's about the actions. You've treated me like I don't matter for too long. I need to see that things will change, not just hear it. I could hear him take a deep breath. I know. I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right. I don't want to lose you, Mom. His words were sincere, and for the first time in a long while, I believed him. There was a shift in the air, a sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. I'm willing to give it a chance, I said, my voice steady. But you have to show me, Andrew. You have to prove that you understand what you've done. He promised me he would, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something better. Paige was still a question mark, but Andrew had taken the first step. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to see where this new chapter would take us. It had been a few weeks since our conversation, and things felt different. The air in the house wasn't as tense, but it wasn't entirely comfortable either. Andrew had started making more of an effort, but Paige was still distant, her usual cold demeanor lingering. I noticed her avoiding me more than usual, and when she did speak, her words were clipped, almost dismissive. It was clear that she wasn't ready to accept the changes that I had demanded, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. One evening, I was sitting in the living room when Andrew came in, looking unusually serious. Mom, we need to talk, he said, sitting down beside me. I looked at him, unsure of what this conversation would bring. What's on your mind, Andrew? I asked, my voice calm. It's about Paige, he began, his voice hesitant. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I'm starting to see things more clearly. I know I've let her control too much of what happens in this family, and I'm not okay with that anymore. My heart skipped a beat. Could this really be happening? Could he finally be waking up to the reality of what had been going on? I'm glad you're seeing things differently, I said quietly. But you need to understand that Paige is not going to change overnight. She's stubborn, and she's used to things being a certain way. You have to stand your ground with her, Andrew. You have to show her that you're not going to let her run the show anymore. Andrew nodded slowly, his brow furrowed. I know. I just don't know how to approach her. She's been so distant lately, and I don't want to make things worse. You need to be honest with her, I said. Tell her how you feel. Tell her that things can't continue like this. You're her partner, and she has to understand that her actions have consequences. He sat there for a moment, absorbing what I had said. Then, he looked at me, his expression determined. You're right. I'll talk to her. I don't want to lose you, Mom. You've always been there for me, and I can't keep letting her push you aside. I felt a small pang of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn around. But I knew that Paige wasn't going to make it easy. She never did. The next few days were tense. Andrew and Paige didn't speak much, and whenever they did, it felt strained. I could tell Andrew was trying, but Paige was holding back. I knew it would take time, but I wasn't going to give up. I was done being the invisible one in this family. I had already made my decision. If things didn't change, I would walk away. I wasn't afraid of losing them anymore. What I feared more was losing myself. One evening, after dinner, Paige finally approached me. Her face was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, perhaps regret or guilt. Can we talk? She asked, her voice softer than I had heard in a long time. I didn't answer right away. I had spent so much time pretending everything was fine, but now, I wasn't going to hide my feelings. What do you want to talk about? I asked, my voice steady. Paige hesitated for a moment before speaking. I know I've made mistakes, she began. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I've been selfish, and I'm sorry for that. I could feel the weight of her words, but I didn't let myself soften just yet. You've hurt more than just me, Paige. You've hurt this family. You've made me feel like I didn't matter. She looked down, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't mean to. I don't know what happened. Things got out of control, and I didn't know how to fix it. I sighed, feeling the weight of the conversation. It's not enough to say you're sorry, Paige. You need to show that you're willing to change. You can't just say things are different now and expect everything to be okay. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I will. I promise. I didn't know if she truly understood what that meant, but I wanted to believe her. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this family tear me apart anymore. Days passed, and the atmosphere in the house started to change, slowly but surely. Paige was trying, I could see that. Her behavior had softened, though there were still moments of tension, of hesitation. I knew she wasn't used to being called out like that, but I also knew that if she really wanted things to improve, she had to make more than just promises. I kept my distance, giving her space to show me that she was serious. Andrew, on the other hand, had been a steady presence, supporting me more than he had in years. It felt like I was finally starting to be seen, like I wasn't just a shadow in their lives. One evening, after dinner, Paige came to me with something in her hands. A letter, folded neatly. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she started, her voice quieter than usual. And I want to try? I know it's not enough, but I want to show you that I can change. I looked at her, my heart still cautious, but there was a sincerity in her eyes that made me pause. She handed me the letter, and I took it, unfolding it slowly. It was an apology, a genuine one, not just a set of empty words. I know I've hurt you, and I've taken you for granted, she wrote. I didn't see how much I was pushing you away, how much I was making you feel like you didn't matter. I promise to do better. I promise to respect you, to value you as part of this family. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. I had been so used to being dismissed, so used to the coldness, that this sudden change felt almost unreal. Thank you, I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. This means more to me than you know. She smiled then, a real smile, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like things were shifting. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew there were more hurdles ahead, but this was the start of something I had longed for, respect. Not just from Paige, but from the whole family. As the days went on, things continued to improve. Paige was more considerate, more aware of her actions. Andrew was more present, and I began to see glimpses of the family I had always wanted. It wasn't perfect, and I didn't expect it to be, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was being treated the way I deserved. The tension had eased, And though there were still moments of discomfort, I knew that we were on the path to healing. I wasn't just going to let this moment pass. I had taken back my power, and now, I was making sure it stayed with me. I wasn't going to let anyone take it away again. And as I sat there with Paige and Andrew, sharing a quiet evening, I knew that this family could be whole again, if we all worked at it. I wasn't just a mother, a grandmother, or a forgotten member of the household anymore. I was Evelyn, and I mattered.